The story begins as the forest erupted with a roar as a towering beast emerged, claws slicing through the air. By the campfire, a man sat calmly while a girl froze in shock. Another man gripped his sword, facing the raging monster head-on. The man by the fire in a crimson cloak curiously asked his companion if monsters' meat truly tasted good. His inquisitive tone made the little girl beside him pause in thought, while he himself calmly enjoyed his well-grilled fish. His companion, the man wielding a sword, affirmed but irritably shouted Iroh's name for help while struggling against the beast alone. With a reluctant sigh, Iroh rose to his feet, his crimson cloak fluttering as he prepared to join the battle. Sparks crackled as Iroh stepped forward, invoking his word magic. Lightning surged through the air as his spell struck the towering beast, dropping it instantly with overwhelming power. The beast collapsed, steam rising as Iroh's magic ended the fight. One man muttered how odd his spells always were, only for Iroh to demand the meat be cooked. Annoyed, his companion shouted while the girl called to calm her uncle. Miur clenched her fists and declared fighting was bad, leaving the armored man stunned. Moments later, his irritation melted into a teasing grin, calling her cute when mad, making her mutter softly in embarrassment. Unfazed, Iroh kept eating, ignoring the tension. Without looking up, he coldly told his companion to hurry up, mocking him with the insult, Lulakan. The armored man froze, while Miur nervously asked Iroh not to get involved. Iroh paused, reflecting he'd grown good at fighting monsters, though much of it still felt unbelievable. Sparks danced around his clenched fist as he realized how long it had been since everything began. Iroh closed his eyes, recalling he'd been summoned to this other world, a distant reality he still struggled to fully accept. His mind drifted back to when it happened. The moment he was dragged into a different world filled him with confusion and unease, marking the day his reality began to change. A summoning ritual reached its peak, the magic circle glowing brightly. Knights gasped in awe as one declared success and another praised the princess, saying she had finally done it. The princess clasped her hands, whispering yes with trembling relief. After countless attempts, she had succeeded in calling them, her expression calm but filled with quiet determination. As the summoning light faded, 5 figures knelt on the glowing runes. Magic lingered in the air as the knights welcomed the heroes. The princess exhaled in quiet relief at her long-awaited success. The 5 students finally regained their senses. Taishur asked Chika if she was okay, and Chika asked where they had ended up. Confused, Taishur called out to Shuri and Shinobu, who answered and said they were okay. The princess thanked them for answering the summoning and welcomed the heroes. The 5 exchanged startled looks, struggling to process her words, while Iroh's thoughts lingered on heroes and summoning. Seeing their stunned expressions, the princess bowed, apologizing softly. The 5 students stood silent, their blank stares showing they struggled to grasp what was happening. The princess assured them the king would explain everything and asked them to follow her. Iroh touched his chin thoughtfully, realizing this wasn't a dream. Iroh glanced around, tense. This wasn't Japan. His mind raced, struggling to process the sudden summoning and the reality of being called a hero. By the balcony, Iroh gazed at the towering structures around him. The cool wind brushed past as reality sank in. This wasn't a dream or illusion. This was real. He looked out at the sprawling city, its grand castles stretching to the horizon. The breathtaking sight felt surreal as Iroh realized he truly stood in another world. Inside the throne room, the 5 students stood before the king. He welcomed them warmly, thanking them for answering the summoning and addressing them as heroes. The king raised his hand, calming them. He acknowledged their confusion but assured he'd explain. Among the group, Iroh muttered quietly, calling the king selfish under his breath. The king began his explanation, revealing that they were currently in the human kingdom of Victorious. He further explained that this land was part of Edea, a world inhabited primarily by humankin. The king introduced himself as Rudolf van Strauss-Arkleum, the ruler of the kingdom, while the young woman beside him presented herself as Lilith, the first princess. He explained that they had summoned the students because their world was in dire need of heroes. The king revealed the reason behind the summoning. The kingdom of Victorious faced a grave threat, and they needed the evil demonkin to be destroyed in order to ensure the land remained safe. A student repeated in shock that they had been summoned to defeat the demonkin. The king gravely confirmed, saying their power was needed for this growing threat. The king explained the structure of Edea, a world divided among 4 races: the humankin, beastkin, ghostkin, and demonkin. For generations, these races coexisted uneasily, but now the balance had shattered. Excluding the ghostkin, The tension between the other three races had reached unprecedented heights, and conflict threatened to engulf the entire land if nothing was done. The king revealed the grave danger they faced. Among the demonkin, their king sought nothing less than the destruction of humankin. Beside him, the princess explained the terrifying power of their enemies. The demonkin possessed immense magical strength and exceptional physical ability, making them unmatched in battle. Against such overwhelming force, summoning heroes had become their only hope for survival. The king explained that if they fought the demonkin directly, humans would stand no chance of winning. To survive, the royal family resorted to the ancient hero summoning magic, a forbidden power known only to them. However, he admitted that humans possessed little magic of their own, and wielding such overwhelming power carried significant risks, a gamble they had no choice but to take. The princess expressed relief, glad they had succeeded this time. A student asked about this time, and the king revealed he once had 3 daughters. The king shared the tragic truth. 2 of his daughters attempted the ritual before. One died, and the other fell into a coma. Gasps filled the hall at their sacrifice. Hiiro's gaze hardened as he pieced together the king's words. Anger stirred within him as he questioned how a father could sacrifice his own children for power. A student stepped forward, confirming if defeating the demonkin would protect the country's people, seeking assurance about their purpose. The king first confirmed, saying it was exact. As he reviewed the records, he confirmed that all 4 heroes were indeed present. One student tilted his head, pondering this with curiosity. His gaze then settled on Hiiro, noting the 5th figure. Confusion crossed his face as he silently wondered why there were 5 when the document stated only 4 heroes. Noticing the unexpected 5th figure among the summoned, the king addressed the matter, while the princess, though uncertain, quietly affirmed her assumption that they were all heroes. The king instructed the summoned students to focus on the word status within their minds. By doing so, he explained, they would be able to check their powers and abilities immediately. One of the students quietly muttered the word to try it out. Glowing panels appeared. A student gasped, seeing Hiiro in the title column. Another confirmed theirs matched, and the rest realized it too. They were all truly summoned as heroes. Hiiro studied his glowing panel, reading his stats carefully. Seeing levels, HP, and MP, he concluded this world functioned like an RPG. The princess explained the text and language were automatically deciphered, allowing seamless understanding of this world and their conversations. The king turned his attention to the lone boy apart from the group, questioning how he arrived there. Hiiro stayed silent, his expression unreadable. Breaking the silence, Hiiro calmly declared he was not a hero. Shock rippled through the room, freezing everyone in disbelief. Startled, the king demanded to know what Hiiro was, speculating if he was a mage or sage. The princess frowned, noting nothing in the documents mentioned this. Hiiro sighed silently as the king questioned his title, remarking he didn't seem experienced in battles. The king tilted his head, catching Hiiro's faint mutter but unable to understand it. He leaned forward curiously. Hiiro stood composed, declaring his title as Innocent Bystander. His answer left the entire room frozen in confusion. The princess softly echoed innocent, while the king repeated bystander, under his breath. Taisha finally realized it was connected to a previous incident. Taisha recalled the moment back in the classroom, remembering how Hiiro had gotten mixed in while they were talking. Hiiro calmly explained he was just an ordinary person dragged in by coincidence. He remarked he only got mixed up with these guys. One student snapped, demanding what he meant by these guys. Hiiro clarified in a composed tone that the ones meant to be summoned into this world were only the 4 heroes, and that he had no connection to the situation. He then calmly questioned how they planned to correct the mistake of bringing him here. Hiiro remarked that their families back home must be worried. The 4 students exchanged uneasy glances as he added they were summoned purely for the kingdom's convenience. Hiiro crossed his arms, stating he shared no bond with the 4 students and didn't particularly care about them, making his indifference clear. Frustrated, Taisha demanded if their time as classmates meant nothing to him, disbelief and anger in his voice. Hiiro met his classmates' anger with an unshaken gaze, his tone cold and detached. He reminded him that their placement in the same class was decided by the school, not by choice. They had never spoken since then, and to Hiiro, any so-called bond between them was virtually non-existent. Turning to the king, Hiiro firmly stated the 4 heroes were the ones summoned, questioning if they truly expected him to fight demonkin. The king hesitated, caught off guard. Hiiro calmly asked if returning to his world was possible. The king explained that only the demonkin king possessed knowledge of such magic. Taisha suggested defeating the demon king to solve everything. Hiiro glared, questioning why they would need to take him down at all. After a pause, the king admitted Hiiro was correct, reluctantly agreeing with his reasoning. The king reassured them the country was magnificent, and from now on they were considered family. One student voiced concern for loved ones back home, but subtly excluded Hiiro. The princess eased their worry, confidently telling them not to fret over their families. Then, with a calm expression, the princess revealed a devastating truth. All records of their existence were erased from their original world. To that world, it was as if they had never lived. The students froze, faces pale and eyes wide. Their existence erased, they struggled to process the shocking revelation. One girl trembled, muttering they'd never existed, while another tried to calm her. The princess explained the world's continuity was maintained as if nothing had changed. The princess reassured them with a gentle smile, saying if they returned, everything would go back to normal as though nothing happened. Hiiro stood silently, suspicion darkening his gaze. He doubted their words, believing the explanations were lies to keep them compliant. Hiiro's eyes narrowed as he accepted he couldn't return to his world, at least not yet. With quiet resolve, he decided he didn't mind. A memory surfaced. The violent car crash that claimed his parents' lives and left him an orphan, carrying pain that never faded. After losing his parents, Hiiro drifted from place to place, growing used to solitude. Deep down, he believed he could live anywhere because he had no true home. Inside the castle, a student agreed with Okamura, pointing out how suddenly they had been called to this unfamiliar world. There was voiced frustration, calling their sudden summoning inconsiderate and selfish. But still, the four students stood united, determination shining in their eyes. Their shared history of MMORPG teamwork gave them courage as they faced this new reality together. Excitement shone as one voice rang out with a confident "yeah." Another recalled how just earlier, life had been ordinary, with plans for a simple classroom field consultation. The brunette girl smiled brightly, lifting a finger playfully as she declared it was perfect timing, easing the tension with her cheerful confidence. The old king gazed at the youths, reassured that they were up to the task. Their determination rekindled his hope that they could rise to the coming challenge. Hiiro Okamura turned from the group, declaring he would move on his own. Shock rippled among his companions as one called his name, but he walked away with unwavering steps. Okamura raised his hand sharply, stating he had no obligation to this country and no reason to fight. He was not a hero and wouldn't walk their path. Okamura dismissed their expectations with a sharp wave of his hand. He began reiterating he had no reason to fight and wouldn't follow the same path as the heroes. Hiiro admits he can't change the fact that he was summoned here and notes how different this world is from his own. He asks if he can spend his time however he wants, and the old king agrees. Hiiro then walks off casually bidding them goodbye. One of the students shouts urgently, calling out for Okamura to wait and stop walking away. The student grabs Hiiro's arm tightly, shouting angrily and demanding if he can even call himself a man. Hiiro turned to him sharply. As the student shouted about the people bowing their heads and demanded they help, Hiiro narrowed his eyes, his single-word response carrying quiet defiance, questioning the very demand itself. Hiiro swiped the hand away, coldly refusing to help. Taisha froze in shock, but another student stepped in, telling him to leave Hiiro be since they didn't need him. One girl dismissed Hiiro with a laugh, saying he didn't really matter, while the other hesitated awkwardly, unsure how to respond. Taisha compared their situation to a game, but admitted it felt as real as life itself. He concluded that Hiiro would be putting his life at risk. One of the girls pointed out that while they were summoned as heroes, Okamura was just a normal person. She urged the others to consider how he must feel about all this. Realizing the point made, Taisha hesitated before agreeing. He suggested they proceed with only those willing to volunteer. Hiiro closed his eyes and stepped back, calmly deciding to withdraw from the matter. Taisha turned away, dismissing him with a sharp remark, wishing him good luck. The princess hurried toward Hiiro, her steps quick and uncertain. Flustered and remorseful, she lowered her head deeply, apologizing with all her heart. Hiiro walked away without looking back, his voice calm and distant as he told her not to worry about it. The lively streets bustled with energy as merchants called out, children played, and townsfolk went about their day beneath the bright sky. Hiiro stepped into the bustling streets, deciding his first move. He planned to gather information using RPG fundamentals, treating the situation like a game. He examined his status, noticing his magic was labeled as word magic. Unsure what it truly meant, he decided to study the concept little by little, determined to understand this strange, unattributed power. While wandering the town, Hiiro realized his priorities. Before anything else, the most crucial thing he needed to secure was money. Okamura considered RPG logic for earning money. Searching through other people's homes could work, but he quickly realized it might be far too risky. He thought of other ways to earn money, like defeating monsters for loot or completing quests to claim rewards. Hiiro pondered his options, realizing that to take on quests and earn rewards, he would likely need to join a guild. Hiiro walked through the bustling streets, deep in thought. He considered joining a guild, but realized he didn't even know if such organizations existed in this world. As he pondered, something unusual caught his attention, pulling him from his thoughts. Hiiro spotted a cloaked figure seated behind a table, a crystal ball glinting faintly in front of him. Realizing it was a fortune teller, Hiiro's curiosity was piqued. The hooded woman's lips curled into a sinister grin as she offered her services, inviting Hiiro to learn his fate. Hiiro refused the fortune teller's offer, stating he had no money, while the hooded woman chuckled ominously behind him. The fortune teller leaned closer, smiling slyly, sensing Hiiro's hesitation, and hinted that he seemed to have a question he wished to ask. The hooded woman grinned menacingly, letting out a low, unsettling laugh as her eyes locked onto Hiiro. Hiiro froze as the hooded woman's words cut deep, exposing his hidden truth, that he isn't from this world. In his thoughts, Hiiro wonders if this strange encounter marks the true beginning of his adventure, and what the true nature of this mysterious elder is. Chapter 2. The hooded woman chuckled dryly, amused by Hiiro's tense expression. With a grin that hid her true intent, she reassured that she had no plans to expose the secret Hiiro was guarding so closely. With a thud, the stool was placed down. As a welcoming gesture, the fortune teller offered to read Hiiro's fate for free, an unusual gift for someone clearly foreign to this land. Though skeptical of fortune-telling, Hiiro took the seat. The cloaked figure had seen through him correctly, guessing his origin from another world. Intrigued, he wondered if this mysterious elder might offer him a valuable lead. He thought, if this fortune-telling was actually a form of magic, then it would be worth hearing her out. As he weighed the fortune-teller's offer, his status screen briefly reminded him of his mysterious word magic. The fortune-teller began her reading with a cryptic remark. She noted his star carried an unusual fate, one not commonly seen. He echoed the word strange, puzzled by what it could mean. The fortune-teller described the radiance of people's hearts, each with a star unique in color and shape. Yet his was no ordinary light, an immaculate sphere of dark blue, overpowering a violent red. It gleamed so strongly, it could captivate anyone who glimpsed it. Though she'd read countless stars, none rivaled his. Hiiro crossed his arms, feigning indifference, but her words stirred something he'd never been called powerful before. As a bird soared overhead, the fortune teller hinted at Hiiro's awakening. He had already gained new wings. Wings that were warm, strong, and destined to carry him far. A vision unfolds. Hiiro's radiant strength draws silhouettes of future companions to his side. Though still alone, his new wings promise to inspire and lead many. Hiiro quickly raised his hand, rejecting the idea of gathering allies. Being alone was simpler. But the old woman calmly reminded him that what she showed was just one of countless futures. The old woman subtly nudged Hiiro, sensing he had a question in mind. As he stumbled over his words, she answered anyway, revealing with quiet certainty that he came from a world without magic. Hiiro politely thanked the fortune teller, ready to move on. With a warm smile, she returned the gesture, grateful for witnessing such a rare and brilliant light after so long. Curious, Hiiro asked if he was the first person this old woman met from a different world, and was surprised he wasn't. She confessed she'd once met a world traveler like him, someone who bore a star just as strange as his. The old woman gave one last grin, welcoming him to return, but next time, it would come at a price. Just as he turned to leave, Hiiro paused, remembering one last question. Flashing a sly smile, he sat back down, shrewdly matching the old woman's wit. Hiiro, still hungry for answers, turned his sharp question toward the heart of this world, wondering if guilds, like those in fantasy tales, also existed here. As he stepped inside the guild, Hiiro took in the setting, bulletin boards, quests, and busy adventurers. It all felt strangely familiar, like a game come to life. A clerk greeted him politely, confirming his name with practiced cheer. Hiiro blinked curiously as the receptionist returned his guild card. She explained that before taking on any quests, certain formalities must be handled, rules of the system, just like any game. With a polite smile, the receptionist cheerfully warned that canceling a quest would cost a hefty 10,000 raison, a fee Hiiro would be wise not to forget. Hiiro examined his guild card and frowned. The currency felt just like yen, and with no money to his name, the 10,000 raison fine hit hard. To make matters worse, He didn't even know what the herb he was supposed to harvest looked like. As the receptionist flipped through the encyclopedia, Hiiro watched impatiently. She searched for the herb's name, muttering to herself. Hiiro, unfamiliar with such books, found the idea of reading one surprisingly tempting. If only he had some money. The receptionist cheerfully reminded him to be careful. Hiiro, impressed, flicked his wrist. His guild card vanished like his status screen. Convenient, he thought. Here is the vast Asabit Plateau, an open, quiet expanse of land nestled beneath the clouds. Hiiro's first quest is about to begin. The sack lands with a thump, packed with lottery herbs. Hiiro remarks the quest is much simpler than expected, then opens his status screen beneath the trees. Hiiro taps, word magic, and the help text appears. It explains that by writing a word with magic, its meaning becomes reality, powerful enough to bend nature's laws. However, its true name is lost, replaced by unreadable symbols. Hiiro deciphers the essence of word magic, though part of its description is corrupted and unreadable. Curious, he decides to try it out for now, stretching his hand forward, ready to test its power. The old woman once revealed that magic power is born from one's blood and must be controlled through its flow. Hiiro remembers it intently, then calmly raises a glowing orb between his fingers, focusing on the rhythm within his veins. Hiiro examines the glowing orb in his hand, contemplating how to use word magic. As his gaze shifts to a nearby boulder, he wonders if it's a suitable surface to test the spell. Hiiro inscribes the word split onto the boulder and channels his magic. As the spell activates, a sharp crack bursts from the rock, cleaving it apart with a brilliant spark. Stunned by the immediate and powerful result, he stares in awe. Staring at the aftermath, he confirms the effectiveness of the spell. With curiosity sparked, he prepares to test another word on the stone this time, origin. The moment Hiiro activates the next spell, the stone bursts with jagged cracks, reshaping entirely. Observing the result, he realizes the extent of his power. This magic isn't just useful, it is a cheat. As he recalls his earlier conversation, the old woman remarks on his magic. A unique, unattributed power, rare and unlike any other she'd seen. The old woman explains that unattributed magic is only possessed by unique magicians. Hiiro reacts with surprise, wondering aloud if she means a rare type of magic used only by certain individuals. The old woman explains that unique magic is indeed powerful, but extremely rare. She reveals that many users couldn't control it, leading to fatal consequences. Hiiro listens in shock as she concludes that most died from rebound. Hiiro reflected that the fate of the first princess's sisters had also been caused by their lack of mastery. The old woman then emphasized that while control was important, knowledge itself was the greater key to survival. The old woman explained that those who perished from rebound failed because they never truly understood their own magic. Demonstrating with her own flame, she showed how clarity of one's power was the key. Hiiro listened quietly, acknowledging her words with a calm nod. In the forest's calm, Hiiro reflected on the fortune teller's warning. Grateful for her guidance, he resolved that by mastering magic, its flow, and his knowledge, he could become a top-notch magic user. Hiiro realizes that this magic still has many mysteries to it, and the corrupted text doesn't help. He began to study his status, realizing 2 spells had already drained half his mana. Though his high MP came from being a world traveler, the strain left his body heavy. Reckless use, he noted, could be deadly. Hiiro realized that at his current level, his magic could only be used 4 times before draining completely. Determined, he resolved to level up quickly and strengthen himself. Hiiro froze at the sound of rustling nearby. Fear struck him. The thought gnawed at him, knowing that if the king ever caught wind of his magic, it would lead to troublesome consequences he couldn't afford. Hiiro's eyes narrowed as the grass shifted, revealing a slimy creature that jiggled in front of him. Recognition flickered across his face briefly as he pondered if it was what he thought it would be. Hiiro stumbled upon a slime, its body jiggling softly in the grass. Just as he approached, the creature suddenly bent and sprang into the air. His eyes widened in shock as the harmless-looking blob revealed a startling burst of speed. Hiiro turned sharply, realizing the slime's movements left him no choice. With a mix of irritation and disbelief, he braced himself, muttering at the thought of actually having to fight now. The slime lunged unexpectedly, its body slapping against him with surprising force. Hiiro staggered back, thrown off balance, and slid hard across the ground, gritting his teeth in shock. Clutching his side, Hiiro realized how real the pain felt despite only losing a small fraction of his HP. If struck several more times, he knew it would be enough to kill him. Determined not to fall so easily, Hiiro steadied himself, channeling magic into his fingertip as the slime closed in, ready to strike back. Hiiro dodged swiftly as the slime lunged again, repeating the same attack. Its persistence surprised him, forcing him to stay sharp for the next move. With fierce determination, Hiiro channeled his power, calling upon his word magic as the energy surged, ready to be unleashed. Hiiro etched the word blaze into the air, and the moment it formed, flames erupted violently, consuming the field in a surge of fire. Hiiro marveled at the blazing aftermath, realizing his magic could conjure something from nothing and alter the world itself. As he studied the charred ground, curiosity stirred. He couldn't help but wonder how such overwhelming power would be reflected on his status panel. After earning his first victory against a slime with word magic, Hiiro resolved to rely less on his cheat ability. Determined to test his own strength, he wondered what kinds of monsters awaited him next on this unpredictable path. Hiiro has now returned to the guild and claimed his quest reward. He briefly notices how unusually cute the receptionist girls were. After finishing his quest, Hiiro stopped by a diner, where a steaming bowl of seafood soup was served before him, its aroma rich and inviting. At last, the steaming bowl of seafood noodles was set before Hiiro. With one sip, his eyes widened in shock as the flavor burst across his tongue, so intense it made his very body rumble in response. The first sip left Hiiro stunned. Rich broth packed with seafood slid smoothly down his throat. Even with just the soup, it already felt like a perfect dish, leaving him eager to test the noodles next. As he slurped the noodles, Hiiro paused. There was something unusual kneaded into their texture, hinting at a hidden richness beyond ordinary flavor. The taste revealed its secret mashed fish woven into the noodles. Waves of seafood flavor rushed through him, overwhelming yet addictively delicious. Hiiro noted the seafood noodles were cheap at 450 rijin and almost tempted to order more. But with lottery herbs to gather tomorrow, he restrained himself, determined to save money. Refreshed from the meal, Hiiro stretched, feeling his body light and his status fully restored. With a satisfied grin, he set out to find an inn for the night. Under the quiet night sky, Hiiro set his resolve. Tomorrow, he would focus on earning money and leveling up to strengthen himself further. The next day arrived, and deep within Courier Forest, the air was filled with the sharp sound of slashing as the hunt for monsters began. Hiiro roamed the forest with his blade in hand, the beeping of his status confirming his growth. Having reached level 3, he felt satisfied, knowing he was steadily leveling up. As Hiiro wandered deeper into the forest, he noted that only slimes appeared, while the goblins he was tasked to subdue remained unseen. Unbeknownst to him, something sinister watched from the shadows. Hiiro had grown accustomed to wielding his weapon, though fighting endless slimes was wearing him down. Just as boredom set in, a shadowy figure loomed behind him, weapon raised to strike. The ground crumbled where the attack had landed, debris scattering as Hiiro narrowly evaded the strike, realizing just how close he was to being crushed. At last, a goblin revealed itself, snarling with a crude club in hand. Hiiro steadied his blade, questioning if this anthropomorphic monster would be killed by him. The goblin lunged forward with a furious roar, club raised high, while Hiiro braced himself with his blade ready for the clash. The goblin roared a second time as its club clashed against Hiiro's blade, the force grinding down hard while sweat beaded across his face. The goblin was struck hard and sent sliding across the ground, clawing at the dirt to regain balance after Hiiro's fierce counter. With fierce determination, Hiiro dashed forward, blade in hand, declaring his resolve to continue living in this world no matter what. Hiiro's blade cut clean through, the goblin collapsing with a twitch and a splatter of blood. He hardened his resolve, telling himself it was just another stepping stone, though deep down, it didn't feel right at all. Hiiro turned sharply, realizing the noise from his earlier fight had drawn attention. Behind him, a horde of goblins emerged from the forest, growling as they lined up, weapons raised and eyes locked on their new prey. As the goblins charged forward with furious roars, Hiiro calmly lifted his glowing finger. He saw them as the perfect chance to test the true power of his magic. With a sharp motion, Hiiro unleashed his word magic, needle. The written word blazed, and countless spikes erupted from the ground, piercing through the goblins in an instant, their cries echoing as the magic tore into them. The goblins closed in with heavy stomps from every side, yet Hiiro raised his glowing finger without panic. He carved the word extend. Acknowledging that a situation like this would eventually occur, he resolved to face it head-on. With a swift motion, Hiiro unleashed his word magic, extending his strike far beyond reach. The force cut through the goblins in a clean wave, splitting everything in its path as the ground echoed with the shock of his power. Surrounded by the fallen goblins, Hiiro stood with his blade lowered, the battlefield painted in blood. Though victorious, the sheer toll of his word magic weighed on him, leaving him mentally drained. Hiiro reflected on the scene before him. Slimes hadn't stirred much within him, but facing monsters with human-like forms felt closer to a massacre. He had always believed himself detached, and yet, this was the undeniable reality. Hiiro lowered his gaze, lost in thought, as the faint sound of scraping steps approached from behind. The quiet tension weighed heavier than the battlefield itself. Surrounded by goblins and slimes, Hiiro steadied his blade. He realized he just needed to keep fighting until the feeling became second nature, daring his foes to bring it on. With fierce determination blazing in his eyes, Hiiro raised his blade and challenged the monsters to keep coming until the weight of battle became second nature to him. A heavy bag landed with a thump at the guild's doorstep, marking the spoils of his hunt delivered without hesitation. At the counter, he presented a bag of 22 goblin fangs for evaluation, leaving the receptionist astonished by how many he had managed to hunt. The receptionist, noting that Okamura had only recently registered, was astonished. Hiiro pressed for her to evaluate quickly and thought that hearing any more would only be bothersome. This bluntness startled the receptionist, who immediately apologized. With 45,000 Rijin in hand, he considered his options. Restoring MP with pills came first to mind, but the thought of buying weapons as well lingered heavily. He discovered that by writing the word clean with magic, both his clothes and body became spotless. Such convenience made him realize this power could truly be limitless in this world. As he left the guild, Hiiro pondered what quests he should take tomorrow. At the same time, he knew he needed countermeasures against monsters far more dangerous than goblins. With a confident smile, Hiiro's eyes sharpened. This new world and its challenges were only getting more interesting. Hiiro bought and trained with new weapons, studied maps, and gathered herbs, steadily raising his level through quests. At the guild, his results surprised the receptionist, and despite only registering, his adventurer card quickly progressed and bore the mark of rank E. The guild staff were shocked, exclaiming at how in just 1 week Hiiro had already climbed ranks, his rapid progress far beyond what they expected. As Hiiro left, the guild receptionists watched him go, one smiling, calling the rising star cool, and awaits his next visit. The blonde receptionist proudly called him a rising star, while the other questioned why she was so proud of it, doubting her interest in this lone adventurer. The receptionist continued to whisper, curious about where he came from, noting how unusual his clothes appeared. As he walked, he thought working too much in Victoria's might draw the king's attention and get troublesome. Imagining it, he pictured the king declaring him as good as a hero. He decided the time was right and planned to leave the country tomorrow. As he walked, whispers and stares followed him from the townsfolk. He realized his school uniform stood out strangely in this world. Before leaving, he planned to stop by a shop to purchase some defensive gear. The next morning arrived, and the sound of a cloak fluttering in the wind marked the start of Hiiro's new day. Clad in a fine shirt, sturdy trousers, and a long flowing cloak, Hiiro's new outfit has fully equipped him, giving him the sharp look of a true adventurer, perfectly suited for the road ahead. Arriving at the quiet village of Ames, Hiiro studies his map and decides it will serve as a resting place for the night, still far from the border. His status panel reveals his steady growth as an adventurer, showing both his strength and the mastery of word magic that defines him. As Hiiro steps into the village, wary eyes follow him from every corner. Doors close and whispers fade into silence. The atmosphere makes it clear. This place doesn't welcome strangers. As Hiiro walked through the quiet village street, a sudden voice called out sharply from behind. A boot struck the ground with force, breaking the uneasy stillness. The girl stood firmly with hands on her hips, claiming he was an adventurer. He turned away in silence as if uninterested, but her voice rose in frustration as she chased after his fading steps. Hiiro looked at her with a cold stare, wondering what the brat wanted from him. Behind him, the girl stomped furiously, shouting in anger at being called a brat. Hiiro walked on without pause, his cloak trailing behind. The girl hurried after him, demanding to know why he came to the village and shouting not to be ignored. He dismissed her with cold words, saying it had nothing to do with a brat like her. Stunned, she muttered that he had called her a brat again. Unmoved, he repeated it, insisting she truly was one. Her outrage boiled over as he questioned what was wrong with calling a brat exactly that. Her face burned red as she shouted, calling adventurers mean and good-for-nothing losers. Deep down she fumed, convinced he was mocking her by calmly repeating the word brat. Frustration spilled over with a cry, until his steady step broke in, commanding her to listen. His voice cut sharp as he declared himself different, refusing to be compared with other people. To him, being lumped together was nothing but discomfort. The girl flinched at his words, her boldness faltering under his piercing gaze. The girl's voice trembled as she asked if he would sham the village. He turned toward her with a puzzled look, wondering why he would ever do such a thing. Behind them, a sudden crash shattered the air. Hiiro turned sharply as shards flew past him. A man fell to the ground with a heavy thud, groaning in pain, while another voice challenged him to repeat his words. A thug raised his blade with a threat to kill, his voice rough and violent. Hiiro glanced calmly, wondering if it was a fight, while the girl shouted in protest. She explained that the men were adventurers who had forced themselves on the village, taking food and doing as they pleased. Hiiro understood at last, realizing she feared another adventurer might sham the village. The girl admitted it with a quiet nod, while he turned to walk on, leaving her calling after him to wait. The girl pleaded for help, pointing out the weapon at his side. Hiiro refused without hesitation, stating he was no champion of justice. He told her to ask a hero if she wanted justice for free, his tone sharp and dismissive. As he walked on, she muttered her dislike for the way he said it, only to be hushed by a villager calling Coco's name. The girl looked to her father, who gently told her that heroes from fairy tales don't exist. Hiiro followed with a cold reminder that such problems are for the military to handle. The father added that the adventurers had stolen the deed, leaving the townsfolk unable to fight back. Hiiro crossed his arms, coldly remarking that their troubles were the result of their own carelessness. The girl protested, begging him to help, but he countered that work deserved compensation. His words left her stunned, struggling to grasp the weight of his demand. Frustrated, the girl shouted in defiance and dashed away, her steps quick and angry. Her father called after her, while Hiiro stood silently, unmoved by the outburst. The girl ran off in defiance, ignoring her father's warning not to go further. He tried to follow, but was struck down hard, his body hitting the ground with a painful thud. The father, bruised and desperate, looked to Hiiro and asked if payment would buy his aid. Hiiro paused at the offer, his sharp eyes narrowing as he considered the request. One of the thugs, a shirtless man with a menacing tattoo on his shoulder, called out, asking how long his little brother planned to keep eating. The younger one lumbered out, grumbling that there was still food inside. Suddenly, a pebble struck the older brother's head, making him flinch in pain. The girl stood her ground, hurling insults at the two thugs with fiery defiance. Her voice rose to a furious shout, calling them idiots as her anger echoed through the street. The girl trembled, insisting she wasn't a brat, but the thug's fury only grew. With a crazed glare, he swung his blade in a wild swoosh, screaming if she was ready to die. Her eyes closed in terror as the strike closed in. The thug's blade crashed down, stopping short as the girl scrambled back in fear. Her wide eyes caught sight of Hiiro approaching, his sword suddenly lengthening with an unnatural shift. Both the thug and the girl froze in surprise, before she cried out to him in desperation. Hiiro's blade stretched forward, pinning the thug to the wall with a sharp strike that left him howling in pain. Calm and unshaken, Hiiro glanced toward the girl and told her to get up. Hiiro's blade shifted with a flick, lengthening through the power of the word magic extend. He stated plainly that he was only helping because he was getting paid. Hearing this, the girl's face brightened with relief. On the other side, the thug demanded to know who he was, but Hiiro turned away, saying he had no obligation to answer. The thug lunged forward with a furious swing, vowing to crush him. But in a swift blur, Hiiro closed the distance, his blade slashing with precision. Shock spread across the thug's face as he realized just how fast his opponent truly was. The thug staggered, muttering in disbelief before collapsing with a heavy thud. Hiiro lowered his blade, remarking that his foe was nothing special. From the side, the girl watched nervously, asking if the man was dead, only to be assured he was merely unconscious. The ground shook lightly as the younger brother lumbered out, puzzled by the scene before him. He noticed his sibling lying unconscious and scratched his head in confusion, muttering in wonder at what had happened. Hiiro's eyes narrowed, quietly taking in the newcomer. Hiiro struck swiftly, his blade biting into the thug's body with a harsh screech, only to find the blow blocked. Beneath the man's clothes, a layer of protective gear glinted, dulling the attack. The brute barely flinched, while Hiiro stepped back, realizing brute force alone wouldn't break through. The brute roared in fury, tearing his clothes apart and shouting over the damage. His rage twisted into a threat, vowing to turn Hiiro into mincemeat. Unfazed, Hiiro steadied his blade, insulted him by calling him chubby, and coldly told him to bring it on. The brute roared, enraged at being called chubby, and charged forward with crushing force. The ground shook with a thunderous whoosh, but but Hiiro met the attack head-on, his blade clashing sharply against the brute's leg. The strike hit with no effect, Hiiro realizing the brute's body was shielded in full armor. Before he could adjust, a massive fist came flying toward him with crushing force. The brute roared and slammed his fist down, shattering the ground with a thunderous crash. Dust and debris erupted, but when the impact cleared, Hiiro was nowhere to be seen, leaving the thug glaring in confusion. The brute froze as Hiiro revealed himself unharmed, standing calmly before him. With a sharp glare, Hiiro invoked his power, eyes fixed in focus as he activated his word magic. The brute stomped forward, only to jolt in pain as his armor began to sizzle. Confused, he stammered, unsure what was happening. Heat radiated off his body, forcing him back as the metal burned. The girl watched in shock, while the brute wondered where the heat came from. Hiiro's magic flared with the word heat. Then, as if scoffing at the brute, he activated the word magic, harden. With a surge of force, Hiiro slammed his hardened fist down, crackling energy ripping through the brute's defenses. The giant roared in agony before crashing to the ground with a heavy bam, the strike leaving him overwhelmed and broken. Smoke hissed from the fallen brute's body as he lay sprawled across the ground. Hiiro stood over him, his strike leaving the armored giant motionless and defeated. As the brute lay defeated, relief swept through the village. The girl and her father watched in wonder, realizing the tide had finally turned. Murmurs of awe turned into joyous cheers, voices rising together under the bright sky. A series of beeping sounds echoed from Hiiro's status panel, showing his experience points had risen from the fight. The father looked on, calling him a remarkable adventurer. Yet Hiiro remained unimpressed, wondering if foes like these truly counted. They were revealed to be the infamous Hiiro's brothers, villains known for their skill, though to him their defeat seemed far too easy. The girl marched up to Hiiro, her cheeks red with frustration, and struck his side with a small but fiery punch, leaving him momentarily surprised by her boldness. She demanded to understand why someone so strong hadn't helped from the start. Hiiro brushed off the girl's complaint, reminding them he never acted for free. He explained that he had only stepped in because the old man had made a request, nothing more. Before she could argue further, Hiiro's hand came down firmly on her head, making her yelp in surprise. It was his sharp way of silencing her. Hiiro brushed it off as a one-time thing, earning a chuckle from the old man beside him. Off to the side, the girl grumbled, still rubbing the sore spot on her head. The old man, amused, laughed and reminded him of the promised reward, rare books and good food, and invited him to stop by his shop. Hiiro gave a brief puzzled nod, agreeing without much thought. Soon after, his eyes fell on the sign of a shop marked by crossed swords. Stepping inside, Hiiro's eyes swept over rows of weapons and armor, impressed by the variety on display. From behind the counter, the shopkeeper motioned for him to come closer. The shopkeeper reached beneath the counter and drew out a sheath blade, extending it forward with both hands. He offered it firmly, telling Hiiro to accept it. Hiiro examined the blade with keen interest as the shopkeeper introduced it as the piercer. He went on to explain its origin, recounting how katanas were weapons first crafted by the beastkin, designed for precision and deadly efficiency. The shopkeeper explained further, noting how humankin's swords relied on brute strength, while katanas specialized in speed and precision to cut down prey. But as the blade gleamed in his hand, Hiiro calmly remarked that he already knew all of this. The shopkeeper assured him of the blade's sharpness, explaining that the piercer's true worth lay in its ability to pierce cleanly through anything. As the thin edge shimmered with a sharp sound, Hiiro noted its sturdiness and mused that it was surprising such a strong weapon hadn't already been stolen. The shopkeeper admitted he had hidden the blade away in the basement, knowing his life was at risk if it were discovered. Hiiro noted how different it felt compared to the other goods on display, and the man confessed he had considered keeping it as a family heirloom. Hiiro stared at the weapon, uncertain, and asked if he could really take it. The shopkeeper admitted it was regrettable to part with, but believed it was better suited for Hiiro. As Hiiro reflected, saying he wasn't seeking credit and hadn't fought those men out of choice. The shopkeeper paused in thought before suggesting another option. As he spoke, footsteps drew near, and the girl peeked into the room, curious about what was being discussed. As Hiiro started to leave, the girl called out to him. He sighed, wondering what she wanted this time. She tossed him a small bundle, leaving him momentarily surprised before muttering under his breath, still calling her a brat. In her hands was a bundle of crumbled cookies, offered with a nervous fidget. She insisted it was the reasonable compensation he had asked for. Hiiro raised an eyebrow, holding a piece up and questioning if this was really supposed to be a cookie. Hiiro bit into the crude cookie without hesitation, chewing steadily. The girl flinched nervously, her heart pounding as she asked how they tasted. With a calm glance, he declared that this was the kind of retaining fee he preferred from a brat. Her eyes lit up, stunned by his words. Coco stomped her feet in frustration, shouting that she had a name and demanding not to be called a brat. But Iro only kept munching calmly, replying with indifference, as if her anger barely mattered. Coco pointed firmly at him, demanding his name in return. Iro let out a sigh, clearly reluctant, but her persistence left him with little choice. Iro finally introduced himself as Hiiro Okamura. Coco's eyes lit up in awe, whispering his name as if it carried weight. Then, with a bright smile, she dashed off, calling him a hero as she disappeared into the distance, leaving Iro staring after her in puzzled silence. Later that night, Iro sat on his bed, checking his status panel. He noticed his experience had surged, gaining him 2 levels from defeating the brothers. His stats had risen far more than expected, leaving him staring at the glowing display and suddenly surprised at the new enhancement it unlocked. Iro studied the glowing message on his panel. His new title, Awakened One, granted enhancements for world travelers. It added great power at level 20, and each future level up would bring small bonuses. Iro's eyes narrowed as understanding settled in. Iro studied his glowing status screen, realizing the blessings tied to being a world traveler. Alongside his awakened state came a new magic, air writing. The idea seemed absurd, inscribing words into thin air, but curiosity won. With a focused hand, he began tracing glowing letters of the word, float. Iro extended his hand, the glowing word he traced launching forward with force. The characters shimmered midair before activating, lifting objects at a distance. Watching the effect, he realized his new ability was more than just useful, it was a power that could easily be called a cheat. Lying back with a book in hand, Iro reflected on his stay in the village. He had gained knowledge, secured a worthy weapon, and gathered more than he expected. With a rare smile, he thought to himself this was truly great. The next morning, the family discovered Iro was gone, surprised he left without a word. Outside, the girl clutched a small bundle of freshly baked treats, her eyes downcast as she held back tears, feeling the sting of his quiet departure. Her father gently reassured her that they would surely meet Iro again. Wiping away her tears, the girl's sorrow eased into a warm smile, hope shining in her eyes. Inside a wooden chest, a sword rests carefully cushioned, gleaming as though it carries meaning beyond steel. Though Iro has departed, what he left behind has become a new heirloom, a token for the village to treasure. Within the castle grounds of Victoria's, the 4 summoned students gathered after training. One stretched her stiff shoulders, another stood tall in priestly robes, while the youngest remained quiet at her side. Taisha rested on the ground, catching his breath. Before them, their knight instructor praised their progress, remarking that they were slowly getting used to their duties. Taisha turned to their instructor, speaking with gratitude. The armored knight, Vale, closed his eyes with a gentle smile, humbly accepting the praise. The 2 students sat together, speaking with ease. Confidence shone in their expressions as they acknowledged the teamwork they had always shared, a bond that strengthened them in their battles. The 2 girls shared their thoughts, one calm and composed, reflecting on the new challenges that proved their growth, while the other winked with lively energy, insisting they keep pressing forward. Taisha collapsed onto the ground with exaggerated weariness, claiming he was worn out. The others stood around him, amused but exasperated, pointing out he was too relaxed. Nearby, someone quietly acknowledged everyone's efforts with a calm smile. By the trees, Princess Lilith greeted the group warmly. Her bright smile carried genuine delight as she pointed out how they seemed to have taken on even more quests lately. Lilith informed the group that the bath had been prepared. Hearing this, Chika pointed at her with gratitude, calling her thoughtful, while Shinobu raised her arms in cheer, clearly excited. Steam rose gently in the bathhouse as the girls relaxed in the warm water. Shuri admired her smooth skin, while Shinobu listened quietly. Chika leaned in, asking if anything strange had happened. Lilith paused in thought as water flowed steadily from the lion's mouth above. Lilith raised her hand thoughtfully, steam curling around her as she recalled a report. She explained that soldiers returning from border patrol had shared something unusual, a detail that still lingered in her mind. Lilith shared what she heard from the soldiers. 2 wanted men had been captured in the village of Ames. The news seemed good according to Shinobu, but the unease in Lilith's tone suggested there was more to it than simple relief. Lilith's tone turned serious as she reflected on the report. Something about the villagers' claim didn't sit right with her, it didn't seem accurate. Shuri, puzzled, leaned in closer, asking what exactly she meant. Lilith recalled the villager's words, a black-haired hero in a red robe, wielding strange magic that could extend his sword, and had a very arrogant attitude. Shuri quietly pieced the details together and looked carefully at Chika. Chika dismissed the idea, refusing to believe that the rotten glasses guy would ever go out and save people. Shuri only smiled, teasing her for exaggerating. As the girls soaked in the bath, Shinobu wondered aloud what truly happened in the village and where the black-haired hero could be now. At that very moment, far away, Iro let out a sudden sneeze, unaware he was the subject of their thoughts. Iro checks his updated status screen, now standing at level 20 with sharpened stats and new abilities unlocked. With the border still far ahead, his next destination is the Torchu mountain range. The path promises new trials, perhaps even new faces awaiting him in the dangerous zone ahead. Iro's stomach growled as hunger set in, making him regret not buying more supplies from Ames. Just then, his eyes caught a patch of strange, fruit-like plants. Thinking they looked edible, he plucked one from the ground, only to reveal a bizarre creature with a face staring back at him. The moment Iro yanked the strange plant from the ground, it let out a blood-curdling scream, shocking him completely. What he thought was food turned into a shrieking creature. Iro bolted through the wilderness, chased by a pack of furious beasts. The harmless-looking plant he pulled turned out to be a Torchu disaster plant. As he ran, he recalled the warning from the guild, something he clearly should have remembered sooner. At the guild, the receptionist had warned Iro of Torchu disaster plants. Once plucked, they screech and draw monsters near. Her odd imitation felt silly then, but with beasts chasing him now, Iro realized it was all too real. The receptionist warned that these plants' screams were similar and loud, and now Iro cursed himself for being careless enough to forget such a warning. Still amused by the chaos, Iro declared this world truly interesting. With a swift stroke, he unleashed his word magic, smoke, summoning smoke that engulfed the approaching monsters. As the monsters writhed in the smoke, Iro calmly cast haste and slipped away. Though confident he could have defeated them, their sudden swarm had left him momentarily bewildered. Exhausted and hungry, Iro suddenly caught the scent of food drifting through the air. His stomach growled as he followed it, the rustling bushes ahead hinting at something, or someone, waiting beyond. The rustling led him to a small campfire by the river, where a fish roasted over crackling flames. Iro's stomach growled louder, his eyes fixed on the meal as he glanced around, debating whether to approach or claim it for himself. Just as Iro reached for the roasted fish, a thunderous crash shook the ground. Someone came crashing down, shouting for him to get away, forcing Iro to leap back in surprise. His meal interrupted before he could even taste it. The armored man stood amidst the dust and rubble of his landing, his voice booming with authority as he demanded Iro's name, the ground trembling beneath his presence. Arnold roared in outrage, declaring that stealing his food was unforgivable as he pointed furiously at Iro. Iro, unfazed, asked if the fish truly belonged to him, while Arnold insisted it did, proudly claiming he had caught it himself. Iro calmly asked Arnold to hand over the fish since he was hungry, but Arnold exploded in frustration, calling him noisy and demanding how his parents had raised such a brat. With a sigh, Iro pressed Arnold again to hand over the fish, saying the old man was making him feel stuffy. Arnold erupted furiously, roaring back that he wasn't the one making him stuffy at all. From the bushes, a small figure emerged nervously. Muir called out to her uncle, drawing the attention of both Iro and Arnold as the air grew tense. Muir stepped out hesitantly, clutching her clothes as she fidgeted nervously. With worried eyes, she asked if her uncle was okay. Arnold quickly called out to Muir, asking for a moment. With fiery resolve, he declared his intent to deal with Iro, vowing to beat sense into him with what he called his fist of love. Iro, however, only looked on with indifference. Muir flinched nervously from the bushes as tension grew between the two men. Iro sighed, his glare sharp and unwavering as he declared his resolve with a calm, "All right." Arnold, taken aback, demanded to know what exactly the boy meant by those words. Iro finally eased up, offering to give up on taking everything if Arnold would just share a bit with him. Arnold, fists clenched in frustration, barked back furiously, demanding if the brat was never taught how to speak properly to others. Iro stood his ground, stating coldly that he wouldn't compromise any further. Arnold's fist tightened with frustration, veins bulging as he growled that Iro wasn't making this any easier. Arnold lunged forward, furious, but Iro swiftly evaded, his movements sharp and precise. Arnold's eyes widened, realizing the brat was faster than he thought. Arnold calmly drew his blade while Iro readied himself, gripping his weapon tightly. A deafening cry split the air as a massive beast appeared, looming over Muir. Terrified, she collapsed to the ground, trembling as its heavy steps shook the earth. Muir's eyes widened in panic, while Arnold began to wonder about her. With a furious roar, the beast lunged towards Muir. Arnold leapt forward, his sword flashing as he slashed at the beast, while a desperate cry of her name escaped him. Filled with both fear and determination, he shielded her from the monster's deadly strike. The beast roared in agony, its arms severed by Arnold's blade. Standing firm between the monster and Muir, he demanded to know if she was safe. Overwhelmed with fear, she called out to him, her voice trembling. Arnold raised his sword, telling Muir to get to safety. But before he could finish, Muir cried out in panic, pointing ahead, warning him of the beast closing in directly before him. From the shadows of the forest, multiple towering beasts emerged, their heavy steps shaking the ground. Arnold stared in shock, realizing he wasn't facing just one enemy. An entire pack of monstrous bears was now before them. Four enormous bears closed in, their stomps echoing like thunder. Arnold tightened his grip, torn between unleashing his power or holding back, knowing Muir would be caught in the crossfire if he acted recklessly. Then, suddenly, Hiiro broke his silence. Hiiro calmly asked if there was only one fish, unfazed by the chaos. Arnold, flustered, demanded why it mattered now of all times. He only pointed it out because with nothing left to gain, he had no reason to remain and thought to take his leave. Just then, Arnold saw the severed paw of the enormous bear, which had crushed the roasted fish in an almost mocking twist of fate. Arnold could only gape at the ruined meal. Locked in battle, he parried the beast's relentless strikes, his blades ringing with fury. Even as he fought, the absurdity gnawed at him. Their only meal had been lost in the most ridiculous way. As Arnold clashed with the rampaging beasts, his strength straining against their might, Hiiro watched with arms folded, dismissive as ever. Calmly, he remarked that it looked tough, urging the old man to do his best. Arnold roared in frustration, demanding help, but Hiiro only waved him off. Hiiro's cold refusal cut through Arnold's plea. Working for free was out of the question. Yet with a sharp glint in his eyes, he added he might consider helping if there was still fish left for him. Arnold gritted his teeth, knowing he couldn't protect Muir and battle four bears alone. Desperation pushed him to shout an offer. He'd share his aquahound meat if Hiiro would lend a hand. Hiiro paused at Arnold's desperate pitch, asking what aquahound meat was. Arnold exclaimed it was first grade, grilled to perfection, melting on the tongue and dangerously addictive. Hiiro's sharp gaze suggested he was at least intrigued. Hiiro asked if Arnold was telling the truth. He snapped back that he wouldn't lie now. But just before they came to an agreement, a bear lunged at Muir, jaws wide, gripping her in its claws. The beast was about to hurl Muir to its mouth when its body froze mid-strike. A glowing word, paralyze, flared. Sparks crackled, and Arnold rushed toward her to catch her fall. Yet it was Hiiro who swiftly scooped Muir into his arms, his voice urging her to stay calm as the chaos raged around them. Muir's sharp gaze fixed on Hiiro as he told her to stand properly or step aside. Flustered, she nodded quickly, realizing she was in a daze. Hiiro calmly instructed Arnold to line up the beasts, brushing off his protests with a dismissive remark. Irritated yet cornered, Arnold finally gave in, shouting that he'd do it anyway. Arnold raised his sword with a fierce shout, warning Hiiro to step back if he didn't want to get caught up. As the beasts rustled closer, his eyes sharpened, ready to unleash his strength. Hiiro marveled at Arnold's wind technique, impressed by its power despite sensing no magic from it. As Arnold launched the beasts into the air with a roaring gust, Hiiro followed up by unleashing his own word magic, extend, the clash of their abilities overwhelming the battlefield. Hiiro's word magic pierced through the rampaging beasts, skewering them as if on a spit. With a sharp glint in his eyes, he announced with pride, he is serving one skewer of barbarous bear right up. With the battle ending, Hiiro examined his katana, remarking how it pierced as easily as tofu. Arnold, still shaken, asked what he had done to save Muir. Instead of answering, Hiiro brushed it off, leaving Arnold fuming as Hiiro accused him of caring more about his power than the girl's whereabouts. Instantly, Arnold called out and Muir peeked out from a rock, trembling, and asking if the danger had passed. Hearing her voice, Arnold rushed to her side in a panic, clutching her tightly and frantically asking if she was hurt. Flustered, she reassured him that she was fine. Arnold sank to the ground, exhausted but relieved that Muir was safe. Hiiro stood firm, reminding Arnold to keep his promise. Arnold, still catching his breath, looked up in confusion, unsure what promise he had made.